we finished our LAN and SAN uplinks right now. And we configured our templates, our policies, our pools. So what is left is the creation of a service profile template. And this is going to be the longest step actually in the whole process, or at least the one where we set the most settings. So if I create a service profile here, that means that I create a specific set of settings just for a single server. I will not go and reapply the same settings again. I will create a new service profile over and over again. So if I want to use the same profile again and again and again, I need to use a template. If I buy a UCS system and I want to get a server up and running very fast, I just click here, create service profile, and that will give me like a short list in just configuring, let me go out of the way, just configuring 2 network cards, 2 VHBAs, and some boot policy. A primary boot device, a secondary boot device, and to which server do you want to select it, click OK, roll out the service profile. This is the quickest way to get a server up and running. It will not use pools. The only thing I need to do is I need to select a single VLAN here, so no VLAN trunking enabled. So simple stuff. So nobody uses this actually. Everybody uses the expert way of doing service profiles, and that is either do through templates or through configuration. I will focus on the creation of a service profile template. This will start a whole wizard that I will reuse a lot of times. So actually I want to do an updating template right now so I can show you the linking of the service profiles and what happens when I disassociate and stuff. So I will call a service profile, I'm going to call it SP template. And here I already get which UUID are you going to use here. In my case it's going to be the pool version. I can enter some comments here. Hello, this is for the mastering UCS class. And moving on. Next option, storage. What do I want to do with storage in my blade? What am I going to do with the local disks in the system? Am I going to run a RAID configuration or am I going to do anything? In this case I said I will allow any configuration. So you select the policy that you want to use here. I can say create a specific storage policy so I can set it manually, or I say no, reuse one of the pre-configured settings. So basically everything here can be either configured separately, so just manually in the configuration like we do here, or we use some pre-configured setting like a policy. So a policy is nothing like a preset for some settings here. So here I'm going to use the policy called AnyDisk. How do I want to configure the SAN? Well, of course, we are in the CCIE data center lab, so we're going to do it in the expert way. In the expert way, I am free to configure as many VHBAs as I like. So first of all, I select which WW node name, worldwide node name I'm going to use, which is pooled. And I can also use a default, but that's not going to change anything. And here we are back again. So select the node name pool, and now we can start creating VHBAs. To create a VHBA, I need to give the VHBA a name. The name is very important here because the name is going to be used in the boot policy. If I use the name in the boot policy, it needs to exactly match with this name here. So in the boot policy, I mean, if I want to boot from a fiber channel disk, I need to specify which VHBA that policy is going to use, and that name is going to be case sensitive name like specified here. So usually you will call this a thing like FC0 and FC1. That's the common name used here. So in our case, we can do it manually, so we can create a VHBA manually, setting a worldwide port name, selecting the vSAN, selecting A or B, and do all kinds of things. But in our case, we're going to use a connectivity template. What that means is we're going to use a VHBA template. And now everything changes to using a specific template. In our case, we can choose Fabric A and Fabric B. I'm going to say FC0 is belonging to Fabric A. And here, this is something you cannot configure in a template, but you have to configure it under the service profile template. So this is not part of the VHBA template, but it is part of the service profile template. Here I can specify which operating system am I running and do I want to set some best practices here. In my case, I'm going to run ESX, so I'm going to say use the ESX best practices and click OK. I'm not done yet. I have another one to configure, FC1. That is using the Fabric B template and it's also running VMware. Again, this is not a requirement. If the lab doesn't tell you anything about an adapter policy or best practices according to the operating system, if there's nothing mentioned about best practices, do not configure this adapter policy. Just leave it empty. In my case, I want to configure some VMware stuff, so let's configure that. All right. Now, because this is a template, if I would be configuring a service profile by itself, you will see the WWPNs here on my side. I would see the actual value. So I would go into the pool configuration and I would take a WWPN out of the pool and put it in here. Because we're running or because we're configuring a template, it means that we do not take WWPNs out of the pool yet. No, we say we derive it from a pool, and we derive it from the pool at the moment that we are applying the service profile. So in this case, I'm not going to see actual values, just that I'm using a pool. That's my storage part. Next up is my networking part. Of course, we're in the data center test, so we say we're going to do this in the expert way. Next week, I'm going to talk about iSCSI NICs. These are called overlay VNICs, used for iSCSI booting. This week I want to focus on the fiber channel booting, so next week we're going to do the iSCSI. I'm going to do the expert way of configuring this. And I'm going to say this is going to be VNIC A. Again, I can do this manually without using any kind of policy or template, but I'm going to use a VNIC template. Same configuration as in the VHBA template, but I want to do more. So I say, all right, this is also VMware, so I'm going to use VMware for the Ethernet portion. I'm going to say VNIC B1, basing on the Fabric B setting. And remember, I allowed multiple VLANs on that Fabric B, remember? So the pinning will fail. And I can reuse the template multiple times. So let's say I want to have two VNICs going to use the same template. I can do that as well. So I'm going to reuse the same template to create multiple VNICs for Fabric A and for Fabric B. So VNIC A1 and A2 and B1 and B2. Of course, there's not a real use case for using multiple VNICs using the same template in a real life server because there's not much bandwidth. But if I'm running a VIC-1240 or a VIC-1280, I have those multiple connections. Each VNIC that I configure here is capable of doing 10 gig. Each VNIC is a 10 gig link. So if I want to make use of that 40 or 80 gigabits of bandwidth that I have available to my blade, I need to make sure that I make sufficient VNICs here. So in our case, we just have a M81KR NIC. So we just have those 2 times 10 gig, Fabric A, Fabric B, 10 gig Fabric A, 10 gig Fabric B. In our case, I'm going to assume that I'm running a VIC-1240. Meaning I have 2 times 10 gig to the Fabric A and 2 times 10 gig to Fabric B. So I'm going to say, all right, to Fabric A, I'm going to specify 2 VNICs, and to Fabric B, I'm going to specify 2 VNICs, because I need to make sure that I'm going to be able to use those 40 gigs that I really have available. So that's a way to reuse the same template on multiple vNICs. So what's fun here, if I edit a vNIC afterwards, so in the creation of a vNIC, I only have a few options. If I use a LAN connectivity template, I can only choose the template and the adapter policy. If I later go back and edit it, I have more options. I can set a separate QoS policy or a network control policy. But wait, I already set this QoS policy and network control policy in the template itself. So I'm not actually sure why this is possible in the first place, because technically everything these settings will come from the template. So you can override the template with this, but I'm not very sure why you would want that. Because otherwise I would create a new template and use that instead of just overriding it, making it a lot more easier to manage for me. So for vNICs, because we have that VIC-1240, I want to be able to use that 40 gigs, 20 gigs A, 20 gigs to B, and I'm going to show you how I make sure that I assign that. So this is where it becomes important. This is my placement policy, and this is where I place certain adapters on certain uplinks. So again, if we have that VIC-1240 card in our lab, remember that the lab might ask you to make sure that it uses the optimal use of bandwidth. If it tells you that, what do you need to do? Well, again, let me draw it again. We have our VIC-1240. Let's assume we only have that one and not the 1280, making it a lot easier for this example. We have FIA and we have FIB. Towards these, we have 2 times 10 gig. Like I said, every pair is inside a group. So the first set, let me draw it a little bit differently. We have the red one, A and B, and we have a blue group called A and B. So we have 2 groups. We have the blue group and we have the red group. These are not port channels, by the way. I'm just grouping them together, called VCON1 and VCON2. That's where I place my physical NICs. So if I want to make sure that I use optimal use of this bandwidth, I need to assign the NICs into certain groups. So going back to our policy here, by default it is set to let the system perform the placement. If you do not have any VIC-1240 cards and you do not care about it, let the system do it for you. What it will do is it will insert, in this order, it will insert the cards in the PCI bus. Why is this beneficial? Well, the system will start looking for the VHBAs first. That's where I'm going to boot first from. So this is going to speed up my boot process a little bit. So first the VHBAs are found in the PCI bus and then I'm going to start booting from them. Then your management vNIC, this is going to be the order how VMware is going to see its links. So by default, it enables the first NIC for management. If you install ESX, you first enable and management possibilities on only the first NIC. So in that case, it means management is going to be enabled here. So that's where I have my management configuration on. So be sure to have your first NIC. This is going to be VM-NIC 0 and VM-NIC 1, VM-NIC 2, VM-NIC 3. So be sure to have a correct placement of this in your system. Now this becomes difficult when I have that VIC-1240, because then I do not have control over the order in which they are inserted in the PCI bus. If I say specify this manually, I will get this option. And here I see those VCON groups. And now I can assign VHBAs and vNICs into certain groups. Now, the system allows you to specify 4 groups, not depending on the hardware that I have. I can use 4 of these groups, and they will be evenly divided. So vcon 1 and 2, like I said, I have two groups. If I specify things in 3 and 4, then 1 is going to use 3 and 2 is going to use 4. So it's going to group them together either way in two groups. So not depending on the hardware, I can still use 4 vcon groups, but they have no use. So in this case, I'm going to say, all right, VHBAs are going to go in vcon 1. Now I can put both of my VHBAs in the same vcon. Why? Because every vcon has access to both fabrics. It's not sharing a single connection. I really have two paths in each vcon that I can use. So both of my VHBAs can go into a single vcon because I'm just allocating hardware resources here. So in this case, I'm going to say my VHBAs go into group 1. Then NIC A1 is going to go into vcon 1, and NIC B1 is going to go into vcon 1. And next I'm going to say NIC A is going to go into vcon 2, and NIC B2 is also going to go into vcon 2. So now I divided my Ethernet interfaces and my Ethernet interfaces, this guy has 10 gigs available, and this guy has another 10 gigs to Fabric A available because I placed it in a different vcon. So by default, I do not have any influence on this. So if I leave this to be default, like it was, like the order 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, then one for the other in a round robin fashion, they will be placed in different vcons. So there I really need to know in the order that I'm configuring them in. So in the order that I configure them in here, in the networking part, that's going to determine the order in which they are placed in. And I probably want to have a little bit more control over that, right? I want to have more control over this. So in this case, I make sure that I have the full bandwidth available. As said, the storage is not splitted because in a single vcon, I have a path to both FIA and a path to FIB. So as the preference for a Fabric Interconnect A or B is configured in the VHBA or in the VNIC. Remember, I can specify A or B in the VHBA configuration. So independent of the placement, I can use connectivity to A and B. This is not a separation of the connectivity. It's just that per group, I have two connections. So per group, I have 10 gigs left and 10 gigs right. So therefore, I do not need to split my VHBAs because I'm not sharing the interfaces here. So one of my VHBAs will go left and one of my VHBAs will go right. They will never share bandwidth. Next, I split my VNICs because I created 4 VNICs, remember? I created 2 VNICs for Fabric A and I created 2 VNICs for Fabric B. I need to make sure that my VNICs are separated there. So to make sure with that, to make sure that separation is possible, I need to specify the vcon groups. So I need to make sure that my NIC 1 is using this group and my NIC 2 is using the other group. I really need to make sure of that because if I do not, they can share the same link and I can oversubscribe that. Or oversubscribe, I just have only 10 gigs available, so there's no point in having 2 of the same NICs with the same template behind them. So these guys had one template, remember? They're using the same settings. Why would I have 2 of the same interfaces in my network on the same link? So that's why I need to make sure to segment that. Now the preference is, actually there is no preference. The preference is in the order that I configure them in. So let's do this again. Let's leave this to the system. So I say, all right, let the system perform the placement. It's going to revert back to this. Actually, it will stay in the same order now. That's pretty funny, actually. All right, that's better. So now the system did the placement, order 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This means they will all be in the same group. If I go back and I delete B1 and I add B1 back, Fabric B for VMware, and I go back to the placement policy, what you see now is that order 1, 2, and 3, and let me reorder that. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So now NICs A1 and A2, like I said, in a round robin fashion, they will be allocated to the different vCons. So FC0 will be in vCon 1, FC1 will be in vCon 2. NIC A1 will be in vCon 1 and NIC A2 will be in vCon 2. Actually, this is going pretty well. So in the other way it doesn't work. So now I'm perfectly segmenting them. So it depends on the order of operation that you create them. So when I do not influence the placement, I might end up with two of the same interfaces across the same physical wire. And that's what I want to prevent. So therefore, I want to have a manual placement. And here I say which guys are in which group. So NIC B is new. I'm going to assign that to group 1. So now I have a dedicated group separation that I really want to. This says how I can automatically assign certain vNICs to this. So I'm going to say exclude unassigned hosts. So I will only want to have assigned hosts in here. So this is, there's also a thing called dynamic vNICs. And dynamic vNICs are things let's say, if I want to really spread out a lot of traffic on a number of vNICs, I can create a lot of vNICs automatically, let's say 40 vNICs automatically, and I can have some selection preferences then in which vCon I place them. I don't think I never saw anybody using that. It's for very special high performance computing environments where I really need to separate traffic on a lot of links. Sometimes VMFX can be a reason to do that, but depending on your topology. So that's not something that is really covered in the data center blueprint.